Joining me now is Michael Sukkar, the manager of Opposition Business. Michael, nice to catch up with you again. Thank you so much for joining me on the show this evening. Let's start with the ACCC report into supermarkets. Now, look, as I said earlier in the show, there really was no smoking gun here. Labor has been blaming supermarkets for the cost of living crisis from the beginning. What do you take from the results of this inquiry?
Well, Albanese takes responsibility for nothing, as you quite rightly pointed out in your editorial. We've seen for the average family a 30% increase in their grocery prices. We know that so much of that flows from the disgraceful decision-making and economic mismanagement of this government, including energy prices, which we know rising energy prices find their way into every element of the supply chain for food and groceries, whether it's the transport, whether it's the refrigeration, whether it's the on-farm work required to harvest the produce, whether it's the manufacturing that you need in order to process and make the final product. All of that finds its way into the final price paid by consumers. This is a major slap in the face to Australians, because basically Albanese strung this thing along, knowing the whole time that in the end they would find really that our supermarkets, though they are very imperfect, I have to say, they do run on tight margins, and in the end they're passing on the price increases that are being imposed on them by Labor government, by Anthony Albanese's government.
Absolutely. I mean, look, they're no saints, at Coles and Woolworths, but the reality is that Albo has used them as a scapegoat. And it was very clear that he was all over the supermarkets to try and take the heat off himself, and it's absolutely failed today. Now, look, Michael Sukkar, I want to talk about immigration, because new figures reveal the rate of overseas arrivals remain above pre-pandemic levels, even though net migration has dropped. This issue was not front and centre at the last election on both sides. Now, in this cost of living crisis, migration has had a massive impact on housing, rentals, costs, roads. The Coalition pledged to cut net migration to about 160,000. That plan seems in limbo. Will you make this a key election point? I mean, why not just cap it? Shouldn't this be front and centre now for the Coalition?
Our plan to massively reduce and rebalance our migration intake is not in limbo at all, Danica. It's, I think, going to be one of the key points of difference in this election. And I think this election, there'll be 2 or 3 big issues that I think people make decisions over. And one of them will be, do we want to go down the path of Labor's Big Australia, a Big Australia policy that they didn't take to the last election, that they've not been honest about? They're running migration at 500,000 a year, Danica, while we're building fewer homes. And they're bringing people in with absolutely no idea where they are going to live, and with no concern on what it does for our infrastructure and housing market. We've seen rents up by more than 20%. And I say, as someone who's from a migrant family, we're very supportive of migration, but it must be planned migration. And you're not doing the migrants any good by inviting them into our country when we cannot properly house the existing population, let alone 500,000 people per annum. This Labor government, they have a clear policy of bringing in 500,000 people a year. They won't be honest in the lead up to the election, as they weren't honest in the lead up to the last election. But I think Australians will look at what the Labor Party does, not what they say. And what they are doing is bringing in huge numbers of migrants with absolutely no idea where they are going to live, or with no concern on the impact. So I can assure you, we are going to reduce migration significantly. We're going to rebalance our migration program. We've said that almost from the get-go, and that remains, I think, a major difference between us and the government. And Australians will decide, do they want to keep bringing 500,000 people in a year, or do they want to reduce it to more sustainable levels, to be frank, more in line with what we were doing under the Howard government than obviously what's been happening in the last couple of years.
Absolutely. I mean, nobody ever voted for a big Australia. That's the reality. And yet here we are. We're almost out of time, but I just want to quickly talk to you about the NDIS with the budget being handed down on Tuesday. The scheme is undoubtedly one of the biggest pressures on the budget. It's a behemoth. And now it's expected to reach $60 billion by the end of the decade. As Shadow Minister for the scheme, how do you get this under control?
Well, Danica, the government promised an 8% rise to the NDIS after reforms that we supported in last year. And now we see in this latest budget that they have leaked out the bad news already that they're missing their 8% growth target, which, let's be frank, 8% growth of a scheme of that side is significant. It's now going to be 10.5%. So they're missing that. In the process, we're seeing people with profound disabilities who actually need support from the NDIS not getting that support.